Hey, Inspired Moneymaker. If you like the FIRE movement, this episode's for you. You're about to hear how today's guest was a single mom who saved over $750,000 in less than 4 years. Episode 211 features Dr. Lakisha Simmons, early retiree and personal finance expert.
I realized I don't want to be in this position of financial insecurity anymore. That's when I learned about FIRE. That popped up in my Google search, and I thought, what is this that I have come across? That moment when I stepped on that college campus, or when I saw that flyer for a historically black college tour, that same light bulb went off. It said, this is about to change your life.
I'm Andy Wong, host of the Inspired Money podcast and financial advisor at Runnymede Capital Management. Being the first in her family to go to college, earning a PhD, and becoming a tenured professor could have been Dr. Kisha's inspired money story, but there's more. Divorce was her financial wake-up call. With 2 children under the age of 10 plus a mortgage, she suddenly had more financial responsibilities on a single income. This is a rags to riches story, and it's about FIRE. Financial independence, retire early. Today at age 41, she's retired and happy. In this episode, you'll learn how she discovered the FIRE movement, tips for accelerating your savings and investments, and why she left her tenured job to follow her passion. Now let's get inspired with Dr. Lakisha Simmons. Kisha, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Andy, let's see. I would say when I was 14 years old, that's when I got my first job, believe it or not. And it was at a truck stop in Alabama. I kid you not. I went for the summer to spend some time with my mother's family, and everyone had jobs. So during the day, I was kind of bored. And they said, well, we manage a truck stop here. We can give you some things to do and you can make some money. And so that's what I did. And so that was my first experience with actually getting money in my hand, my own money, and figuring out, well, what do I do with it? And of course, at that age, I just found ways to spend it all.
What's it like working at a truck stop?
You know,
Do you have any crazy stories?
At that age, you see a lot of things, but what I mainly saw was a lot of hardworking people. That's what I saw. A lot of people, truck drivers and people on their way to work. And so I do remember that kind of hustle and bustle of people having places to go and really processing that, of people being so busy and having work to go do.
Now, I know that your parents were very young when you were born. Would you say that you grew up in poverty?
I would say that. It's really hard for me. I have a real problem using that word, using the poor or poverty, because my family loved me so much, and a community really raised me. My whole family raised me. I've lived with my grandmothers. I've lived with aunties, uncles. And so I really just remember love growing up. Not so much about what we didn't have, but what we did have. And, my mother was just 17 years old when she had me. And, she was pregnant at 16. She had me at 17. It was tough. It was really, really tough growing up. I remember being on government cheese and getting government assistance, but at the time it didn't feel that we didn't necessarily have what we needed. I feel like we always had what we needed. My mother still always worked 2 jobs, but she didn't graduate high school. She had very low paying jobs. She still has a very low paying job. And I'm glad I'm in a position now that I can help her. And I do help her. I help her. She's getting ready to retire soon. And it's just important that I'm still supporting her and helping her to reduce her hours at work as much as possible, and help pay her car off and different things to support her, because even though she was young when she had me, she still, I do believe she did always love me.
When money is scarce and you're that young, do you realize, like looking back, do you feel like there was trauma there? Or do you just not realize it when you're just living it and that's the way things are?
Andy, that's such a good question. I believe some people will look back and they say, oh, we were poor and I hated it and I remember what it was like. I do remember what it was like to get just a few things for Christmas. I do, but again, even if I just got a few things for Christmas, I had so many different family members around, and I'd have an auntie who might give me something, an uncle who would give me something. So even, you know, I don't think I have trauma around us not being middle class or wealthy as a young girl, but I think I have more trauma around the fact that I just didn't have my parents. I think I have more trauma around that because when my mother had me, she raised me for a little while, and then when I was in 8th grade, I believe, I went to live with an auntie full time. So even though I had, grandmothers who I would go stay with off and on, maybe the whole summer or here and there, I would live with them, when my mother was on the other side of town or different things. But in 8th grade is when I full time went to stay with another family member. And I stayed with other family members all the way through until right before I went to college. And I stayed with my mom again because she had moved to a different state and she was just gone. And so when I was staying with my different family members, I do have trauma around not having my mom and not having my dad. So I do have trauma around that, but not so much around not having the money, which is what has actually helped me, what helped me on my FIRE journey, because money to me is a tool to get what you need. Does that make sense? My happiness doesn't typically come from having things. It never has, because I never had a lot of things. So my money comes from, or my happiness comes from experiences with people. So I'm most happiest when I'm with my husband now, when I'm with my children. Yesterday we played hooky, my youngest son, and we went to the zoo, and we packed a lunch. We went to the zoo. We spent the day out together, went for walks. We cuddled up on the couch and watched a movie, and my heart was so full. I was so happy. That's where I get most of my happiness from.
You mentioned the love of all your different family members, but moving around has to be difficult, especially when you're in 8th grade, because you're old enough to have very strong feelings and you're going through just being in 8th grade is hard enough already. How do you think that shaped you as a person?
Yeah, it shaped me in a lot of ways, but I would say mainly it taught me that the most important thing is how you treat people, because that's what they're going to remember. Later, if you come back across someone that you haven't seen in years, you're going to remember what your interaction was like with them. That's going to be the first thing you remember. How did they treat you? How did you treat them? And so that's what it taught me. Moving around, living with different family, I remember those who were really kind and generous to me. And I remember those who were cold to me and who really, they let me stay there. And I'm so thankful, because I don't know where I would have been at that time without their support. But they weren't always the kindness. They weren't always the most gentle when I really needed it. So those are the things I remember now, and that's what I instill in my children. It doesn't matter how much money someone has. It's really all about how they treat you. And it's really important for my children, because now that they're starting to become entrepreneurs, my 11-year-old has a book out. It's called Divorced: 7 Keys to Making It Through Your Parents' Divorce, which he authored himself. He came up with the idea for the storyline, the illustrations, and he wrote every word of the book. And so now that I'm teaching him and he's getting good feedback on his book, and that he's seeing his sales come in, and we're deciding how he's going to invest the money. Well, I'm telling him how he's going to invest the money, right? But he knows it's important that he still be a good person, and how can he help others? So that's always going to be what I come back to, because you just can't get away from that no matter how much money you have.
Wow, that is so cool that your kids are entrepreneurs too. You're an entrepreneur also, which I look forward to getting into. When did you realize that education could be a way to a better life?
Wow. Andy, education changed my life. As I mentioned, my mother was 16 and dropped out of high school. And my father, he did graduate high school and he was able to go to the Marines. And so that was what he did to try to make a better life for us. For me, it was really important to go to college, and I'll never forget that day. And if anyone's heard me speak before, they know that I always come back to the moment where education changed my life, which is when I was introduced to the concept of a college tour, and that there was a historically Black college tour being offered through a nonprofit organization in my community. And I got wind of it, and I thought, wow, historically Black college tour. Now I knew what college was, but I didn't. It just really struck me because before that moment, I didn't know what I wanted to be, who I wanted to be. I was just going through the motions. I wasn't a good student. I was very truant, just skipped school a lot. I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't in fights or anything like that, but I just didn't have any goals. I didn't have any aspirations. I didn't have anything to really look up to be. So when I saw this historically Black college tour, I thought, wait a minute, is this something I need to participate in? Because I had never really had interest like that beforehand. And lo and behold, I was able to gather up enough money from relatives and friends and family to go on that college tour. And Andy, that changed my entire life because I'm just a girl in Indianapolis, living life day to day, not seeing a picture of anybody who's gone to college besides my teachers, right? And so college tour. And I was able to go on that college tour, and that college tour took me to a number of Black colleges, obviously in the South. And it just changed my entire perspective because I had never seen, let me just tell you what I saw. So when I'm on this campus, so I just take Tennessee State, that's where I ended up going, Tennessee State University. And I'm on this campus with, the student ambassador walking us around. But what I'm seeing, Andy, is other students walking with purpose. They had their backpacks, their shoulders were back, they were up high, they were smiling. It was just like the sun was just shining on them. They looked like leaders. They looked like they were going somewhere important. And I thought, wow, I've just not seen that. And that inspired me, okay? That inspired me, and it lit something within me. And I said, I have to go to college. That was the first time in my life that I knew that I had to go to college. And I went back home, went back to school, and I picked those grades up. I got those grades improved, and I made it to college. It was a struggle to get there because I didn't have anyone in my family to really help me, but I made it and I got there. And once I got there, I made sure there was no way I was going home.
Wow. So you were not only an unlikely college graduate, but even more unlikely PhD doctorate, since you're Dr. Kisha today.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting that it was that goal of college and having that experience that really motivated you to want to do well and complete high school as well. What was your high school like? Was it Black, white? Like, what was the diversity like?
Yeah, that's the funny thing. I had always been in the majority until I actually started working after my undergraduate degree. So growing up, high school, college, I was always around other people who looked like me. Always, and so when I started working, my first internship was at a chemical company, believe it or not, in Indianapolis, and it was led by a Black owner, but it was a diverse company. But it wasn't until I started working for Caterpillar that I realized, whoa, I'm different. I'm the different one. When I worked for Caterpillar, there were not many who looked like me, that's for sure. And that's when I had a big wake-up call that you're no longer at an HBCU, you're no longer at home, you're in a different world now. So that was different. That was really different for me. And then, of course, I went to the University of Mississippi for my PhD. Again, now that's when I really learned about the world. Let's face it. I really learned about racism, and I learned about what the Old South was. These are things, I grew up in Indiana. So I really didn't have to face those things head on the way I did when I was at Ole Miss.
So all that schooling, you kind of took a path figuring out what is a career that's going to make you money, right?
You know, the funny thing is, Andy, when I determined that I was going to go to college, there was no stopping me. You know, you apply and they ask you, what do you want to major in? And I just wanted to know what was the major that was going to make the most money with a bachelor's degree. Honestly, because that was my whole focus, was going to college, getting a good job. Go to college, go to get a great paying job. And what better major than computer science? Because you have to remember, that was 1998. And so there was this whole thing about Y2K. Andy, do you remember Y2K?
I remember Y2K, and you and I are laughing because there was so much worry,
Yes.
and then it was a non-event.
Right.
And I don't know how many billions of dollars were spent
Yes.
in the United States and around the world, but I remember in 1999, I think it was Italy who had done the least.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh my gosh, Italy's going to be in trouble. And then Italy had the last laugh because everything was fine.
Right. It was hilarious that we thought that as soon as the year 2000, the clock struck, right, that all the computers were just going to stop
all
working.
computers were just, everything shut down. Yeah.
It didn't happen. So, but with all that fear around, I knew that was the major I needed to go into, because I'll need to help bring the computers back from, the big meltdown is going to happen. And so I knew I'd get a job. And so I did. So that was my goal, to get a highest paying job. And so I chose computer science. That worked.
But that's not where your passion was.
How did you know? You knew that.
Did you know what you, did you have an idea at that time?
I had no idea, because again, I wasn't very self-aware at that age. I don't think most of us are 18, 19, 20, 21. We don't know. We're just going through what people tell us we're supposed to be doing. And so I went to college. I majored in computer science. About halfway through, I guess my sophomore year, I realized that, I'm really good at programming. I mean, I am good, but I don't love it. And it's actually not my favorite, as my bonus son says. It's not my favorite. So I started looking around in the course catalog. What else can I take that I might be interested in? That's when I learned about business information systems. I thought, okay. And they had this track for education, because I knew all the teachers that I had in high school that really helped me get to college. When I went back and I said, please help me turn things around, I really need to go to college. And they poured into me, and I never forgot that. And so I knew that I had this love for teaching because of the teachers that I had. And even at Tennessee State, I had teachers who were just fantastic people. And I wanted to be like them. And so I majored in business information systems education. And I realized, again, probably after I had taken my teacher praxis test, passed that, I was moving along my junior year, and when it was time to start looking for jobs, Andy, I realized, oh my goodness, I'm going to get out. I'm going to be a high school teacher, and I'm not going to make hardly any money. And back then, I think starting salaries were $26,000, $27,000 a year. And I said, oh my goodness, I really want to do this, but I grew up without much. I'm going to come out with student loans more than that. I just don't think I can afford to go into that profession and not make any money. I just don't think I can do it. So I made the hard decision to kind of drop the whole education track and just focus on business information systems, which, you take your finance, your economics, your management classes, as well as programming classes, web development classes. So you get both sides. And that really set me up well to move into an information technology department. And I landed a really great job at Caterpillar Financial. And so that's what I did. But again, it still wasn't my passion. I would come home from work all day and I would just say, okay, what now? It's still this kind of empty feeling. I was making great money. I made $44,000 coming out of college. So back in 2002, I think that was pretty good. That was pretty good money. It was way more money than I had ever seen in my life. So that's where that path kind of led me with my passion. And then eventually I learned about the PhD project. A postcard came in the mail and I said, oh my goodness, what is this? And so the PhD project is an organization that focuses on diversifying business schools. Okay. The way they do that is recruiting talent from industry, minorities, okay, people of color, from industry jobs, such as me working at Caterpillar, and teaches us all about the PhD process and how we can become business school professors. And so I was able to go to their conference. They have a fall conference for anyone interested in going back to school to get their PhD. And they just really take you through the training process of from A to B. This is what it's like to apply. This is what it's like to be a student, to get past your comps. What is a dissertation? You know, they just tell you everything, all your questions that you have. So I was able to go through that process. And eventually I was able to fulfill that void of teaching and be able to go back and get my PhD and become a university professor.
Wow, that is so cool. Well, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to chat with you is because the headline that is always associated with your name is that you saved $750,000 in 4 years as a single mom at the time. You've since remarried, but your mindset when it comes to money is completely different today because you've accomplished that. When you got out of school and you were working, what was life like? What was your mindset with money at that time?
After my PhD or my undergrad?
Yeah, after, well, both.
Okay.
Yeah. Did it change?
Well, here's the funny thing. After my undergraduate, I thought, I made it, right? I've got $44,000 a year. Oh, this is great.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, got married, and it just wasn't all I thought it was going to be, right? And unfortunately, the marriage ended in divorce, or fortunately, I don't know. It depends on how you look at it. But whatever the reason, it ended in divorce, okay? No shade to anyone involved, but just it ended in divorce. And when that happened, I was, the caregiver for the children, the primary parent, and I was living with one paycheck, 3 mouths to feed, and life got real different. This was I already had my PhD at this point when we were divorced. And so life got real crazy real fast, because when you have 2 incomes, you just always feel like you have a security blanket, and you just think, well, I can buy what I need to buy. I mean, I never was a huge spender. Let me just first say that. I never, because of how I grew up again. And so it just wasn't something that I wasn't out just buying really expensive things or buying a lot of things. So I don't ever consider, I never really had debt like that. I wasn't, I paid my student loans off before my PhD, and I had a few student loans during my PhD, because, you have to go full time. And even though my tuition was paid, sometimes there's other little things you have to pay for, and then just not working. So I had a little bit of debt from that, but that all was soon paid off. Before the divorce, it was paid off. And so being a mom with the 2 children, and now, don't have that quote unquote, I guess, kind of security blanket of knowing there's 2 incomes, things got really real. And I had to make some cutbacks, but it wasn't hard for me. People always say, "What was it hard for you to cut back?" Because when you have 2 incomes, I was living in a really big house, 5 bedrooms, $2,400 a month mortgage. And when he left, or when we were divorced and I had all that on my own, I figured I've got to make some cuts. And it wasn't hard to do.
How do you go through a divorce, which is a crazy, can be traumatic experience, and fire altogether? Or is it because of the divorce that kind of pushed you to do some research and discover fire? What happened?
Sometimes, that's why I say fortunately, unfortunately, the fortunate part was it forced me to get uncomfortable, to look at where I was again. And I saw that young Lakisha, who was kind of being passed around, family member, not really stable, financially or emotionally, and I was back in that same seat. And so I said to myself, what can I do to get myself stable financially and emotionally forever? What do I need to do? And one of our main insecurities is finances, right? A lot of people, that is one of your main insecurities, is having enough money, whether that's, you may have enough money for today, you may feel you're not preparing for the long term, or you don't have anything saved for retirement. And that's where a lot of the women I work with, that's where they are. They may have great jobs now, but they hadn't been thinking about the long term. And so now they're trying to make up for lost time, because they may be 40, they may be 50, some of them are 60. And they're thinking, oh my gosh, I hadn't been saving. How can I do this? And so that's the position I was in. Well, I was in my 30s, my later 30s. And I said, what can I do? And so I knew I had to sell the house. I had no issues with selling that house at all. But I was going to make about $30,000 on the sale of the house. And so at that point I said, well, what should I do with the $30,000? Because after the divorce, I had $5,000 cash. And I had about $125K in my retirement from, the Caterpillar rollover. And I had worked at another university before that time. And so I had some money that had been rolling over the years. And so, I basically said, what do I need to do next? And the main thing was, after I sold the house, I got the little lump sum and I started doing some research. What can I do? What do you do with proceeds from the sale of a house? And I said, well, what can I use this money to retire early? And I don't know, it was just God, because it was just something that was on my heart. Again, how can I get financially secure? I'm not really putting up more than 10% a month into retirement. That was what I was doing personally, okay, with my income while I was married, 10%, because that's what I was told you were supposed to do. And 10% works if I'm going to retire at 65, but I realized I don't want to be in this position of financial insecurity anymore. That's when I learned about FIRE. That popped up in my Google search, and I thought, what is this that I have come across? It again, like that moment when I stepped on that college campus, or when I saw that flyer for a historically Black college tour, that same light bulb went off that said, this is about to change your life. And I went down the path of FIRE, and here I am.
Which websites did you start with?
I came across Mr. Money Mustache first. That was the first thing I saw. And it was like the simple math behind early retirement. And I sat down and I read that, and I thought, oh my gosh, that does sound really simple. Can it be that simple? So Mr. Money Mustache, Bigger Pockets Money, Millennial Revolution. I think those were the main three. And I just kind of read everything. Millennial Revolution, they have this workshop on their website. They call it a workshop. Was like a blog. And you read through all the different articles, and it kind of step you through how they invested for early retirement. And that was so helpful to me to see it all in black and white. And it inspired me. So after I really got going on my FIRE journey and was getting really close to FIRE, when I had about, I don't know, 800K or so, that's when I said, I need to start documenting my journey. And so I created a blog and what is FIRE and how does it work? And I started linking to things that helped me, and, what my process was to help others, especially those who look like me, people of color, look like me and can see, okay.
Because you don't look like Mr. Money Mustache.
No, not at all.
Okay, so the simple math, right, for financial independence, retire early, you're trying to reduce your expenses so you can increase your savings, and then you want to invest so you can grow whatever nest egg you have and amass like a certain amount of money so that you can retire early, or have the flexibility to decide, do you want to work? Do you want to change jobs? Do you want to retire and travel the world, or do whatever you want? As a starting point, you sold the house and moved to like a smaller apartment so that your monthly, you could bank that difference. Mm-hmm. What else do you do? Like, do you start with a spreadsheet, or are you just trying to trim what you can as you go? What's your approach?
Oh, yeah. So when I was, and I had always used a budget where I could track my spending, or a spreadsheet. I'll say a spreadsheet where I could kind of forecast what's coming up, what will need to come out of the paycheck. But it was a more loose spending experience because, again, it was the two incomes. But once I went through the divorce and I had the one income, I tightened up and I went line by line in my spreadsheet. So this is the first step. I always tell everyone the first step is to write down every single thing that you have going out, every bill, every auto draft, every your gas, your spending, going to the theater, every single thing. You have to just make a list. You have to constantly be writing it down so you can see where your money goes and what you spend the most money on. And then this is kind of my trademark here is I say, now look at that list. What things are on that list you're spending money on that you don't value? Because believe it or not, I didn't value that house. It was big and it looked nice to everyone else. It was a headache for me. It was a headache and I didn't like it. It was just too big.
More work.
Yeah, it was so much work and so much money, and I didn't like the money that was going out. So that was the first thing that I sold and got rid of. And so then I looked at the next thing. I said, well, gosh, I'm spending $125 a month for a mobile phone. Why? There's got to be some other options. So I started looking for a lower cost mobile phone service. And I came across Mint Mobile. And, it saves me so much money. I spent $180 a year for my mobile phone service for the entire year. Okay. Then I started looking at the next biggest thing was my car was paid for. The next biggest thing was groceries. Okay, where am I shopping? I'm shopping at Kroger. Nothing against Kroger. I have nothing against Kroger. Okay. I just looked at the stores I was looking at and I looked for lower options. Aldi came and I said, gosh, my mother shopped at Aldi. All my family, we shopped at Aldi when I was a girl. Why have I not still been shopping at Aldi? We shopped at Aldi, Save a Lot, all those stores. That's where we shopped. So I started going back to those stores and I saw a huge difference in my grocery bill. So again, I'm not going to go through my exact, every single thing would be here the rest of the day. But that's what I would tell people to do is go through everything. Your insurance. Yes, you need to call every year and ask, am I getting the best deal? You need to shop around, get a quote from someone else. Look at all the options and cut those expenses. You would be surprised. Then once you cut all of those expenses as much as you can cut, and when you thought you've cut as much as you can, cut some more. And then after you've cut more, then say, okay, now how can I create additional income?
What's the no spending challenge that you did?
Oh, and yeah.
How important was that to your being able to execute your plan and get to where you wanted to be?
That's a good one. And I should do that again. So the no spend challenge or no spending challenge is you take 30 days and you can't spend money on anything except for going to the grocery store, of course, getting gas, if you have to go to the doctor, but you can't spend money to go do anything recreationally. You can't spend money on food to eat out. You can only spend money on groceries. So if you want a nice steak dinner, then you have to take yourself to the grocery store and buy your steak and bring it home and cook it. So you're basically not spending money on anything you want. What it does is it causes you to really think about everything you're about. Every time you spend money, you have to think about it. And you have to say, okay, for this month, I'm not doing it. I'm just not. So that helps you kind of rein in your spending. Because then the next month comes and you say, okay, now I can spend money. You're going to think twice about everything that you buy and say, do I really need to buy that? And I do this. So sometimes I even have to laugh at myself because it could be the smallest little thing. It could be something that's $5. And I'll say, do I really need to buy this or can I make this at home? Can I make this? And I'll get out. I have my sewing kit actually right here because instead of buying another mask, I was trying to repair one because it's like, I just don't need to go buy it. If I have a sewing kit, I can sew this, right? So it's just that mindset. And now I'm a millionaire. So it's like, but I still think the same way, because it just makes sense to me to not have to go, because it's a slippery slope. Spending is a slippery slope. And I think anyone listening can relate to that, right? You can turn around and spend $500 this week, and you thought you spent 200, and you actually look at it and add it up. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I spent $500, right? So the no spend challenge just really helps you rein it in for a month, and I bet you're going to see a big difference.
Kisha, what's the difference in your view between owning and consuming?
Between owning and consuming, owning, this is actually a good question, because there's so many things that we're taught that we should own things, right? And sometimes the way we go about owning is through consumption. So we may use the credit card to own things because we're consuming, but we should not have maybe gone that path. I moved into that apartment after I sold the house, and I lived in apartments for 3 years. Okay. Until, I purchased again. And when I purchased this time, I purchased more wisely, in my opinion, for me, and for the money that I had, the requirements that I needed. I made a wiser decision, which was a townhouse. And it's like a duplex style, but I would never even know that I had neighbors next door. And it's a good size, but it's not very large. And so I feel like owning in this way feels really good, and just not over consuming, right? Just not cluttering the place, not just buying because I can, but just being mindful about the money and the work that it took to make the money. That's the other thing I try to teach my children, because they say, well, I have money and I want you to order this off Amazon. Here's the money. I said, well, it's not about the fact that you have the money that you can buy it. It's being mindful about, do you really need this? Is it just that you want it and you have the money, you can buy it? So it's just thinking about the consuming, I think, is important.
I've heard you say that you're overeducated yet underpaid. So this is something that anyone can achieve, right? Like, you can be making an average salary. Anyone can take steps to increase their savings. What's the goal? Is it a percentage of your income that you're trying to save? Is it looking at your expenses and saying that I want to save X my expenses, like 5 times, 10 times, 20 times? What is the goal on the savings front?
So the goal for me was to become financially independent as soon as possible while still living my life. So I knew that I wanted to have a goal of investing at least 50% of my income. So half of my paycheck needed to go in investment vehicles. That looks different for everybody. But I knew that with 50%, I think 50% gets you retired in 17 years or something, I believe it is. So if you start from zero and you start investing 50% of your income in about, I think it's 15, 17, somewhere around in there, then you can become financially independent based on the numbers. It's like 6%, 7% interest or returns in the stock market. So for me, that was just about becoming financially independent, not necessarily retirement, but get into a place where I can work if I want to, and if I don't want to, I don't have to. My expenses can be paid from my investments. So that's what worked for me. I was able to get that number up to 60% of my income pretty quickly. And that's why I say it's important to create some income. Find ways, what's your unique gift? What's your unique talent? And find ways to share that gift with others and make some extra money from it as well, to put into your investments to help you get there faster.
What did that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, I thought about, what are my unique gifts? What has God how has God made me so different and so unique, and how can I use that to help other people? So I wrote a book called The Unlikely Achiever. And it's a workbook, honestly. It is full of worksheets and reflections for you, guides to walk you through body language techniques. You know, when you're in a meeting, what should you do with your hands? If you're speaking, what should you do with your hands? Negotiation, which we all have, you know, we have to do in our life. How to best advocate for yourself. Budgeting is a part of the book, obviously. So I created that workbook to help others who are also on their journey, their unlikely journey. The name of it is The Unlikely Achiever. And so that was a way for me to help others, but it also helped create some additional income for me. Speaking engagements, sharing my gifts, sharing my talents, teaching, which I love to do, allowed me to make extra money. So that side hustle money right into the brokerage account, right? All of those things really helped me to get that $750,000 in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, you killed it in 4 years.
Yeah.
Was it the stock market
Yes.
returns that helped you to do that in a compressed amount of time?
Absolutely. And I was talking to someone, and they said you should do the math. How much of it was money you actually put into the stock market, and how much of it was the gains? And I keep saying I'm going to do that, and I need to do it because I didn't. Because, you know, when you're on the path, you're just putting as much money in, and you're letting it sit and grow. You're not really looking at how much of it of your money is actually returns. But we had such a great stock market during that time. I was really fortunate to be in at that time because the returns were so high. Was it 2018? I think the returns were 31% in 2018. So where else can you go and get 31% return on your money in a year? That's phenomenal.
Well, while you're sleeping.
While you're sleeping. Yeah, while you're just working and putting more money in, right? So you can't discount that. Now, obviously, every year is not that. But even in 2020, the year of COVID, 15% returns in the stock market. So it's, you know, the best time to start is today. You know, if you don't worry what we had in the past, you didn't miss it. And there'll be down years. They're coming. There are going to be down years. They're going to be up years. But you just stay the course and stay focused, and you know, you'll hit your goal.
Well, congratulations on reaching financial independence and being an inspiration to so many people. I want to get back to the purpose and passion, because your studies and working at Caterpillar, like this information systems, that's not where your passions were. Mm-hmm. So once you reached financial independence, like, is there a fork in the road? How do you make choices on where you want to go? Because having a tenured professor job for most people seems like, all right, I'm set for life, tenure.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, you're right. And I had colleagues that I talked to about it before I resigned, and they said to me, why would you do that? This is the tenure. You're tenured. You should never leave this job. And I said, well, that's not going to keep me happy. Just because I have a tenured job, values. I was appreciative of the job. It helped me get to where I was, but now that I'm financially independent, I don't love it that much anymore right now. Right? Does that make sense? It's like I'm not going to force myself to keep doing something that I don't have to do. I don't think anybody would, right? I don't think if you love it while you have to do it. But when you don't have to do it, if you really are not loving it anymore in the way that you used to, then it just may be time to move on to something else. And I'm a big proponent of, hey, don't think that because you go to college and you start a career that you have to do that career the whole rest of your life. You don't. And I think many of us are taught that. I think that's where the whole tenure, oh, you had tenure, you should stay there forever. Well, no, I don't think that you should stay doing anything forever. Life is a journey, and there are stepping stones, and there are different, like you said, there can be a fork in the road, and there's a time that maybe there's a 10-year period that I was a professor, and I loved it. I loved my students. I taught thousands and thousands and thousands of students, and I touched their lives and they touched mine. And I think that's where I was supposed to be for that 10-year gap. Okay. From 2011 to 2021, I was a university professor. And I was the first Black professor that many of my students had ever had. And so I know I touched their lives the way they touched mine. But after 10 years, it may be time for something else. The same way when I worked for Caterpillar for a good portion of my life, was a professor for a good portion of life. Now I feel like I'm in a sabbatical period. Honestly, it's a time for rest. That's how my husband best said it. He said, this is your time for rest. You've accomplished a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD. I've been an app developer, have my own app, Homework Suite. I've authored a book. I've helped my son author a book. I've been a consultant, a speaker. You know, I've done so much, and I think it's okay for me to take a break, a pause, reflection period, a rest period. And then I can see, what does God have for me next? Because I'm sure there's something. I'm sure it is.
What are you doing at this moment? You're taking a rest, but you have a business too, right? As an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So Brave Consulting is my business where speaking engagements, still speaking at universities when they bring me in to speak to their students about personal finance and why it's important to get started right out of college and budgeting your money even while you're in college, as well as organizations. I've spoken at Caterpillar Inc., Alliance Insurance, Personal Capital, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, just a way to help share what I've learned and share my experience in hopes that helps other people, just light a fire or spark something within them that inspires them and motivates them in a way that they most need it. And I think I just see it as right now as God just telling me to just share my life, be an open book, because if it helps someone else, because the way that it helped me when I learned about FIRE and I learned about financial independence, there's someone else who needs to hear it. So,
well, I think what you've achieved is extraordinary, and documenting your story for others to learn from and get inspired by, you can continue to impact many people.
Yeah, I do workshops. I have video recorded courses on exactly how I budget, where I give you my FIRE budget, how you can, look at when could you possibly FIRE? And there's charts in there. There's formulas already laid out, 401k information. So many of my friends and relatives were not aware of even really what the 401k was, how it can help them retire earlier like it did me. That's where most of my wealth was, in my 401k and had a 403b and a 457. And so just getting the word out about what those tools are and how they can really help you build wealth. Yeah. So
that's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
In your research, you discovered that you could contribute to multiple retirement plans, and you had to proactively seek that out.
Yeah.
Your benefits department did not tell you.
No, the 457 is a tool available, and you can look it up on the IRS website. I always say, go to the source, right? The IRS website. But the 457 is deferred compensation, which is available to some who work at universities, who are school teachers, firemen, police officers. If you work for the government, you may have that available to you and not even know. My husband, he had no idea that he had that available to him for all the years that he's been a professor. He never knew, and he's investing in it. So you're right. The HR department, they may not share every single thing, or they may have mentioned it to you and it just kind of went over because you didn't even know what it was. And so, yeah, I try to help get the word out on that, because those are tax deferred accounts, which means you can put your money in it from your paycheck right off the top before taxes come out. So it helps lower your taxes today to allow you to invest more money and help you get there faster.
Yeah, I don't know the limits off the top of my head. Is it 19,500 roughly for your? So you could basically double your tax-deferred savings because you had this additional plan available to you.
And that's exactly what I did. And so people say, how in the world did you get $750K? Well, it's just those little hacks. So I was maxing both of those out, right? That's $40K a year right there. And that came out of my paycheck, right? But that reduced my taxes so much. I don't think people know just how much you're going to save. All that savings goes into your really investing. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you still bring
it's a win-win home. You get taxed less, you're squirreling away more, yes. Plus you had the appreciation. So it was like triple win.
Yes. And those are kind of the things that I teach. I have a blog, that people can read all about it, everything I put out there. So LakishaSimmons.com, they can read up on it.
Kisha, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
This, for me, everything is about what I value and how I treat people. And so that's how I define success. I define success with really how happy am I? And I find my happiness from being good to others. Because I just feel like that at the end of your road, when you look back, you're going to look back on how you treated others, how others treated you. And that's what's gonna matter the most. And so that's how I see success, is how am I sharing with others? I can't keep all this information to myself, right? And I want to help others reach their financial independence or reach their goals, whatever those goals are. And so that's how I define success, just by how am I helping others get on their way, on their path.
I love it. Well, we'll continue following your journey to see if there's, act 2, act 3.
Thank you.
But the choices are yours, right? You're not bound to any job because you have to be. You have that flexibility. So very curious to see what choices you make, because it's all what you want to do.
Yes. It's a great place to be in. I highly recommend it.
So tell the Inspired Money viewers and listeners where they can find out more. You mentioned your blog. Where can they follow you?
Yeah, I'm on social media at Dr. Kisha, DrKisha Simmons. And my website is Lakisha, Lakisha, Simmons.com. So I'd love to hear from you. I love when people reach out and say, oh, I heard you on the Inspired Money. And so I love when people reach out and maybe take a course, grab my workbook, my son's book. If you've been through a divorce, you know what that's like, especially if you have children involved. So this book is from his perspective. It's on Amazon.com, Divorce, 7 Keys to Making It Through Your Parents' Divorce.
Thanks so much, Kisha. Dr. Kisha, keep inspiring.
Thank you so much, Andy.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? Dr. Kisha is proof that committing to the right financial moves can really pay off. Be mindful of your spending. Think about what you need and what you value. The more you can save, the more you can invest. And living with values can bring you happiness. One last thing. Reflecting on her childhood, Dr. Kisha said it was less about the money and more about how you treat people. Try to brighten someone's day today simply by making an effort to be more caring and kind. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, please let me know by posting a comment below. For watching to the end, I want to send you this Inspired Money sticker. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/Andy, send me your name and address, and I'll put this in the mail for you. Thank you so much for joining me on this mission. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.